morning, everyone. I just want to say welcome to those that are joining us online. We have a special treat today. My brother in the Lord, Travis, has finally been able to come up and join us. And I'm going to ask him to come up here. Now, Travis and I have known each other 8.5 years now. I met him when he just got out of prison, and he was new in his faith. He has worked very hard, very, very hard. We really proud of him, actually. Really proud. He had this hunger, this insatiable hunger for anything to do with the Lord. He wanted to just dive in head first. And so one of the first things I did was, and he'll probably tell part of this story, but the first thing I did was I had been going through the School of Biblical Evangelism from Living Waters online, and I was like, you know what? Travis wants to share the Lord with people. This would be a really good way to get him trained up and sharing the Lord. So that's where we started. And I've been mentoring him since then. I mean, sometimes we spend hours and hours on the phone. Sometimes we don't talk to each other for months. And then it's like we never miss a beat. He's been faithful. He's been diligent in studying. And I'm so proud of where he's come. And so I'm going to let Travis speak and turn it over to him.
First thing I thought of when I was sitting here during worship was, I don't remember what book it's out of, but it's, Here I Am, God, Choose Me. You know, and I think of the walk I had, the lifestyle I led, that was all decisions I made long before Christ. Obviously, he was pressing in the whole time, and I didn't know any better. But I kept on coming up with a message. Once we talked to Pastor John, we're talking back and forth, and all week long, I've been trying to come up with a word, and basically the word is they overcame him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony. And a lot of you guys have read the book, I know, and I think today the greatest thing is to be able to come here to share some of that story with those who haven't, but also the fruit that I've produced since then. All the things that I've gone through and remained solid in my sobriety, in my walk, and not conforming to the world like I used to do. 10 years ago, I wouldn't be here at all. The last place I would be in a church talking to folks that I think would judge me, or anything like that. And then I found out a lot with my walk and talking to Pastor John. One time he told me, he goes, "You're judging them before they could judge you." I didn't realize that was a thing until now, but it is true, absolutely. So I was actually in Colossians this morning. I woke up at 5 o'clock this morning, and there was just a couple things here. I took some notes, and then, but in Colossians chapter 1, verse 21 was actually one of my verses of who I am, knowing myself in Christ. Once you were alienated and hostile in your minds as expressed in your evil actions. But now he has reconciled you by his physical body and through his death to present you holy, faultless, and blameless before him. The hardest thing I did was many of us work towards that book. A lot of people work towards it. My wife did tons of work towards it. And it was one of the hardest things I had to do. It was after I became a believer, after I made my decision for Christ in this huge way, and He healed me in an instant of addiction. And even after that, my story, which I used to brag about, all the horrible things I bragged about with the type of people I hung around with, I all of a sudden had a hard time saying some of this stuff. And it was hard because I can't believe I went as far as I did. But it also, through discipleship, through the people I hung around with, the new people I became close with, it also became easy to tell the story of the testimony that Christ did in my life. It has nothing to do with me, really. You know, in a moment of my most intense, weakest moment of my life, I cried out to the Lord in a Brewers game, which is, we'll get to that part of the story for those who haven't read it, but and I almost threw away my life for a drink. And I cried out to the Lord literally in that spot. I prayed 5 innings into the game. I didn't even know what was going on besides that there was drinking around me. That was taken from me in an instant. And that testimony in itself, every day is proof of the fruit that we bear, that every day that I'm not out there drinking every single day a case of beer like I used to, or shots and drugs and all that stuff, and the lifestyle I used to lead. I'm just going to go, right to the heart from all this right today. I actually work with a group of guys I'm hoping down in Green Bay. I'm hoping they're watching right now to know that to show the fruit that the way I am now, to show that the stuff that I'm doing and they're doing in their lives and stuff like that, to know that Christ can do this for them too. And He's there and He's willing. There's an amazing group of guys that I'm working with right now, my Thursday night guys down in Green Bay. If anybody down in Green Bay on a Thursday night, you want to join a men's group, I'd be more than willing to meet you. So Colossians, we'll go on to chapter 2. I'm going to go from verses 9 through 15 quick. For the entire fullness of God's nature dwells bodily in Christ, and you have been filled by Him, who is the head over every ruler and authority. You are also circumcised in Him with a circumcision not done with hands, by putting off the body of flesh in the circumcision of Christ, when you were buried with Him in baptism, in which you are also raised with Him through faith in the working of God, who raised Him from the dead. And when you were dead in trespasses and in the uncircumcision of your flesh, He made you alive with Him, and forgave us all of our trespasses. He erased the certificate of debt with its obligations that was against us and opposed to us. And He has taken it away by nailing it to the cross. He disarmed the rulers and authorities and disgraced them publicly. He triumphed over them in Him. I read that this morning. At verses 9 through 10, I realized I was full in Christ. Verses 11 through 12, I realized that I am alive in Christ. And then on 13 through 15 was that I am free in Christ. Thank you for that. I like a little back play. Okay. So the story that I wrote the book about was to get out there, and it was going to be the testimony of this is what God has done for me. This is what my faith has brought me to right here, is to come here and show that even after that decision I made for Christ, all these years later, 9 years later, I am still out there doing this every day. My wife and I, we've sacrificed so much time and money and things like that to bring glory to God for all He has done. And for the life of me, my wife came home one day from a rummage sale a couple years ago, and she said, "There's a man up the road. He's a pastor. He retired. He's got tons of books," and I buy a lot of books. So I said, "All right, let's go check it out." So I walked over to this house, and here's a man who's a retired pastor, moved to the area, and his daughter was probably in her 30s. And a bunch of people were there, and I started talking to this man. I gave him a copy of the book, which just came out. And as I was sitting there and I told him my testimony, and he's looking at me because I'm like 6'4" and covered in tattoos. People look at me a little differently sometimes. And he's looking at me, and I said, "My testimony can be rough for some people to hear." And I said, "But don't get me wrong, the greatest testimony that I've ever personally heard was the story of a young person who gave their lives to Christ at 5 years old and never did the stuff I did. That is the greatest testimony I've ever heard." And that girl started crying, his daughter, and she said, no one ever gave me credit. I've walked away from parties. I didn't drink. I didn't do drugs. I always did what I felt was right. I lived with Christ my whole life, and no one's ever said anything like that to me before. And she was in tears. And it's true. How much power Christ has to those. I look at our kids. I look at our daughter with the faith she has as a child. I want her to keep that forever. I want her to live a life that just shows that Christ is in her. And I've been into prisons. I've been to jails and ministry and stuff like that. I've heard every story. I've heard, there's nothing new under the sun. I've heard a lot of things. And a lot of it's like, well, praise God. And a lot of times I say praise God, and people will walk by and they go, some testimonies, they go, well, that was pretty intense. And it's like, well, let's hope that they never do that again. Let's hope that this Christ is with them now. They've made that decision. Let's see them born new again. Let's see them, now they've had this chance that these guys get out of prison, and a lot of them fall back into their old lifestyles and stuff like that. And it's unfortunate, but the statistics are very bad right now with jails and prisons. It's like they always say, it's a revolving door. And so many guys I've seen that are just they have so much faith, and they're in there, and they've been in there for life, and they have faith in Christ, and it's just an amazing thing to see that. But also we need to pray for those who get out, and that they can walk this new life. But so I'd like to start off with the book started. It was a little bit about my childhood. And there was some traumas and things like that in the childhood, growing up and stuff, that made me go into a rough direction. But I personally like to go from the age of 18 and on, because that's when I made the decisions that I had to, as a grown-up, as a man, I had to pay for them decisions I made. That was all on me. That wasn't, I can't blame anybody else. I can't go around, well, if so-and-so wouldn't have done, whatever. It's at the age of 18, I already started drinking very heavily. I was working 2 jobs, and I was drinking every night still. And I have family and friends from back in the day that always said, they're like, well, you were a very functioning alcoholic, or you were a very functioning drug addict. And I never slept. I worked 2 jobs. I made good money. I had a brand new truck, snowmobile, 4-wheeler, all these fun things. And I was just living for myself, living for the world. I filled my life with these things that I thought would make me happy. I thought the new truck would make me happy. It didn't. I thought the snowmobile, I thought the 4-wheeler, the boat, all these things would make me happy. None of it did. I could never find happiness in material things. And even driving up here today, I see a 4-wheeler for sale up the road. I'm like, boy, that'd be really cool to have. And I'm like, well, do I need that? Probably not. I'm not going to find happiness in that. I do find happiness in the fact that I got to come up here and speak to you people after all this time. This has been a long time waiting, long time. And we'll get into the discipleship part of that in a little bit. But so all these things, I started getting into trouble because of the lifestyle, the drinking and the bars. And it's a small town, everybody knows everybody, and you're going to feud with some people and be best friends with others, and it's just a mess. And I started getting into trouble with, I had a couple of disorderly conducts, and underage drinking fines and things like that. And I didn't care. I really didn't. It just wasn't a thing. Like, small town, northern Wisconsin, you just kind of, to some people in the bars, it was like a badge of honor that, oh, I heard you got in trouble last night. Yep, And I never did anything that was horribly bad at that time. Until I started to get into my early 20s, into 21. When I turned 21, I lost my license for an OWI. And that had been a situation that I put myself in, that I got called in for the OWI by a family member. And I know that at that time, I got the OWI. My first job, my day job, got taken away from me. It went under. It was a recession. That company went under. I worked as a cook at night at a bar and grill. That went under. They sold out. And now all of a sudden I went from 2 really good jobs making good money, and I don't have my license, and all in like one swoop. It was, don't have my license, I don't have a vehicle, anything. I had no way to get around, and I don't have 2 jobs now, which I was so used to that income. And that level of stress from that really was what started propelling my life in a negative direction. Mental health wise, it was just horrible. So I bounced on the side, different bars and things like that. I made myself very well known in the bars for bouncing and things like that. And drugs really entered my life at that time. I really did a lot of, there was a lot of drugs and alcohol. There was, the people I hung around with got progressively worse. And a lot of it I thought was, we talk about brotherhood. We'll bring that up a couple of times. A lot of the guys I hung around with, motorcycle clubs and things, I thought they were brothers. I thought we ought to have each other's backs and we'll always be there for each other no matter what, it's going to be great. And so fast forward a little ways along the line, I went out one day. I'd been drinking all night. Went out one day and got in trouble into a fight on a lake ice fishing, of all things. And when I was leaving the lake, I ran into another vehicle and stuff like that. And it's still hard to say it actually, all these years later. And the police showed up and I took off. And when the police showed up, they said that the person I hit with the vehicle needed attention from medical attention, stuff like that. And at that time, the cops wanted to put me in prison for attempted murder because of the situation. The district attorney at that time said that the cops were out of their jurisdiction and they took away the attempted murder plea. It went down to speeding. So they said it was a disorderly conduct with a motor vehicle. That's all they could get me with. Well, you don't want to be put on the radar, and be that guy. You don't want to be like, hey, he just got away with something that's really bad. So I took off. I moved to Alaska. I was like, what better way to get away from your problems than move 4,000 miles from home? And so I moved up to Alaska and everything was great for a while. If you're from Wisconsin and you go up to Alaska, they're going to look at that, they're going, oh, he's a farm boy from Wisconsin. They give you jobs right away. I had a job in a day. I was working loading trucks for the pipeline and stuff like that. I was doing really well. The problem was that my problems didn't go away by flying away. My problems followed me. My anger from when I was younger, I was angry, irritable, discontent. I wasn't happy about things, and my drinking came back. So everything, I was working so many hours, then I would drink on the weekends and stuff like that. And once it all started coming back, that old lifestyle, it was about a year in, I decided, got into a fight with my roommate, and I'm like, well, I'm going back to Wisconsin. This ain't working for me. I flew back to Wisconsin, and everybody's really excited to see you when you come back after that long, for about a week, and then they go back to their lives, and I went back to just not very happy. I wasn't a happy person. I was very angry. And so I ended up getting a job for a company. I was a forklift driver for a while, and that led me to working tons of hours. They were paying me for not missing work at all. I always had a good work record, and they were giving me so much money that I would a lot of times sleep in my car and get back up and go right back to work, and I'd go out to the bars, have a few drinks until I could pass out and all this stuff. And that lifestyle led to more trouble, more disorderly conducts, just a lot of random troubles. That was down in Green Bay, so I moved back home, which was about 40 minutes from there, to another small town. And I was bouncing in a bar one night, trying to make some money on the side. I was working for a woodworking company, and working for that company, I decided to bounce in the evenings and on the weekends at this bar. So one day I was in the bar, and this woman was bartending. I was bouncing, and a guy came into the bar, and he looked like he was going to cause trouble. And I asked him, I said, "You're not drinking anything? Why are you here?" And he said, "Oh, I'm just going to come in and have some water." So I told him he had to leave because I had a bad feeling about it. And he walked out. Bar was empty, just me and the bartender, and she was talking to me, and she said, someone came in to get a drink, and they said, "There's a guy behind the dumpster out back." So I walked out, and there's the guy behind the dumpster, right around bar closed. And I told him, "You need to get in your car, you get to leave." So I jumped in the car with him, We drove around the block, and I had a talk with him. And I knew that I could see that it wasn't a good situation. There was something weird about it. And knowing now, years later, he actually made the news 3 years ago for having killed a woman in a Green Bay hotel room. And so I took him for a ride. I talked to him and stuff, and I didn't realize that the woman that was bartending was the wife of a guy in a very well-known motorcycle club in Wisconsin. So they wanted to know who I was, come talk to me, like thank me for the situation, and they were checking into who I was. So I am bouncing another night. She's bartending, and all these guys come in with their colors on, their the vests, their cuts. And they come in, and there are a lot of big dudes. And I'm like, wow, this is interesting. It was pretty intimidating when you got a bunch of guys as big as me or bigger walking in, and they all want to know who you are. And so I started partying with those guys a little bit that night. And the owner of the bar had too much to drink, and he came out with a gun. So I stepped in between him and the guy who was the president of the club and walked him off. And I got the gun from him, and I put him in the back room. I knew the bar owner. It was, I highly doubt he was going to pull the trigger. I was pretty drunk too, so I didn't care. But that gave me huge street credibility. That was a big deal for these type of people. That was all of a sudden they said, we're going to wave your hang around. You're now prospecting for our club, which means you're in pretty big. And I started watching their drug houses and things like that when they went on bike runs. They would have meetings, which they call church. They'd have church meetings, and then I would have to sit with all the wives and make sure they're all right in the bar up the road. And if anybody started anything, it was up to me to take care of it and all that stuff. And I, at that time, started carrying a gun with me. And that was just the lifestyle. I loved it for a while. I really thought it was great. And but that brought on a whole level of, now it wasn't even so much drinking. It was a lot of drugs, drinking drugs nonstop every single day. And that's enough to drive anybody crazy. Doesn't matter who you are. That's just, that lifestyle is difficult. Some guys can do it for a while. A lot of guys, they can't. And I started getting really paranoid. I ended up taking a job for a printing company in Green Bay, Wisconsin. And down in Green Bay, I was making really good money, working all the time, bounced on some weekends, hanging out with that crowd. And with the lifestyle I was living, I became really paranoid that the cops were after me because of illegal stuff we were doing. So I ended up moving in with my cousin and her husband. So I had no place to stay. I was pretty much homeless. I was kind of bouncing around from couch to couch, different people's houses and stuff. And I basically was getting kicked out of the club almost because there was a lot of weird stuff going on in politics within the club. Guys were getting kicked out of the club, and I didn't know how I was standing because I was with these, friends with a lot of them. And I was paranoid not only because the criminal aspect of it, but now I'm paranoid because there's cops involved with things, and it's just, are the cops after me? Are they after me? Where am I even safe? So I quit going out to bars for a while. I quit going out pretty much in general and just stayed at home and drank and did drugs all the time. And one day I went out and I was hanging out with a bunch of friends that I knew from a tattoo shop and stuff like that, and went home and I slept for an hour, and I woke up and I had this whole thing in my head. This whole thing was that cops are after me, the club's after me, the FBI's after me, the fire department's following me, which is a common delusion actually, I didn't realize until years later. But so I took a radio scanner I had that was just for a fire department, but for some reason I thought it was the cops too that were tracking where I was going. I went to work, grabbed my toolbox at work, loaded up, took off. And I ripped my cell phone into multiple pieces, threw it out over the 4 counties I drove around through so the cops couldn't trace it or find any evidence of people I talked to. And I drove around all day with that police scanner, and I had a .38 Special snub-nose revolver in my pocket. And I drove around from Green Bay. I drove all the way up far north. I went all over the place, and then finally I was running low on gas, so I took off towards Wausau. On my way towards Wausau, the fire department scanner was saying stuff like, "Oh, the fire's spreading from this area to this area." I thought it was a code word for it was me. Drugs and alcohol, mental health issues. There was a lot of things going on in my head. I just kept on driving. Well, I was running low on fuel, so I pull into a gas station, and then everything just hit the bricks because I was like, now I'm almost out of gas. Everybody's following me. And I walked into the gas station, and I kicked everybody out except for a guy who was roughly my age. I said he had to stay. So that went from just driving around delusional to now you're in a hostage situation. And I called 911 and said, I don't know why you guys are following me. This is ridiculous. And we went through this whole standoff. And they had a sniper come in. They had SWAT team. They closed down all the schools and businesses within the area. And within an hour, they had talked me into giving up the guy that was technically hostage. And I came out and was arrested, and I basically didn't think there was anything wrong with any of it. I just said, well, if you're going to kill me, kill me. And they said, we don't even know what you're talking about. So that was a big shock. And you never think, you see stuff on TV, you never think going crazy, you're like, oh, come on, like it can't be. I literally believed I did nothing wrong. And woke up a day later with a suicide vest on, and they're driving me to Winnebago Mental Health. I didn't realize that because of a lot of things, I had two cousins in Winnebago. I had a cousin in Bellin Psych, and I had another one in another mental health facility, because mental health had a lot of issues running my family, my bloodline for it. But I went into Winnebago Mental Health. I was there for 2 weeks to do competency, and they said that they're like, no, we know there's something wrong. You're obviously delusional. You made this whole thing up in your head. There's nothing to it, and everything like that. And while I was there, guys are trying to get out of prison by going there. And there was a guy who swallowed razor blades, and there was just all sorts of really weird craziness. And I'm like, wow, these guys are messed up. Not thinking that all these guys are faking it, trying to get out of prison. And here I am actually thinking these things are all true. It's like no one's after you. And then all of a sudden, big screen TV in the day room, I look up and I see I'm on there. I've had the nightly news for a week. And made the newspaper, the Green Bay Press Gazette, stuff like that. And a lot of it hit me. That lifestyle I led, all these things, it was just too much. It was too much, and part of me, I feel broke inside. I went back to Shawano County. While I was in Shawano County, we went to the court process for the summer and stuff like that. All summer long, it was go to court, they put me back in isolation. So I spent almost a year in isolation. That's 23 and a half hours a day in a cell, no television, no radio. I didn't have a pair of glasses, so I couldn't read a book. I was on so many sedatives that I couldn't see straight anyway. So eventually they said that the judge agreed. He said, he said that he agreed that that there was something wrong and I needed to get some help. He said that you've gone 27 years of your life without being in trouble. You're not in and out of jail. So he said, we're going to give you one chance. And he said to me, I believe in second chances, but he goes, you will never receive a third from me. And I took that very seriously. I've actually got to voice that to him too since then. So I went to Mendota Mental Health. He sentenced me to 26 and a half years in Mendota Mental Health instead of going to Dodge Prison. And the prison, so I was going to get help. It was a prison for, it's a criminal facility for people with mental health issues. So I went to Mendota not thinking that anything's going to come of it. 26 and a half years, I'm like, I'm going to be 50-some years old when I get out. What's the point? And I would walk the halls. I was very angry at everyone, even though it's my own fault, which is weird. I had a hard time dealing with the things that I caused. I had a hard time dealing with my own issues. This is all stuff I did. This isn't anybody else. I can't blame anybody else. This is no one else's fault. And I ended up about a year in, I had one of the staff come up to me, and I didn't realize she was a believer until a long time later. she came up to me and she said, Travis, she goes, no one's going to help you but yourself. And she would pull me into day rooms and close the door, and she'd let me say what I wanted. She goes, yell, swear, do whatever you want. And she goes, but no one's going to help you but yourself. And she said, all you do is talk about drinking and you talk about drugs and all this stuff. And she goes, it's really inappropriate. And now I'm on the intensive treatment in the biggest mental health facility in the state. And they're talking to me about the things I'm saying. That's how bad it was. And so she said, I think you should go to a meeting and get some help for your drinking. So I went to an AA meeting. When I got there, I thought it was a joke. I didn't want to deal with my own issues with the drinking and the drugs and stuff. So people were talking, and I was kind of making fun of the situation, making light of it and stuff. And so the guy who was from the outside who came in to run the AA meeting ended up, he started talking about God because he was going to fill the time. He's like, I didn't know what to say. We talked years later. He goes, I didn't know what to say, so I just started talking about God. In the moment he started talking about God, I don't know how long of time it was, but I know that I've suddenly have this thing roll over me where I felt horribly bad. I felt worse than I've ever felt in my life. And I know right now, how I know, I don't know, but the pain I felt was what I caused other people. And I don't know why, but that's like the first thing I thought of was this is what I caused. And then all of a sudden I would feel this feeling wash over me. And how do you describe love? But that's what a love was. It wasn't like I've ever felt before. I never felt love before. I've never, not as a kid or anything. And then pain and love, and it would wash over me, like just nonstop washing over me. And the second it was done and the meeting was over, and all of a sudden I realized I'm sitting in a room full of guys and I'm all teared up and I don't even know what to say. So I went back to the unit. I got on the phone and I called everybody I knew and I apologized for the first time in my life for anything I've ever done. And the woman who sent me there, there's guys throwing a fit, you don't use up phone time. But I was on the phone for 2 hours, calling people up, apologizing for the things I did and stuff like that. And I felt great, but I felt horrible, and then I felt great, and I was like, I felt this love, and I was trying to what is that? I was trying to understand it. I couldn't describe it to this day. I can't describe that feeling I felt of like being loved, being wanted, being someone like to care for you, someone like I just felt this amazing feeling. And then all of a sudden I'd feel the pain when I thought about the things I did and the people I've hurt. And I got done with that 2 hours of phone calls, and she stuck up for me the whole time. She told everybody he's working through something, let him go. And shortly after that, she had a hand in actually getting me off the intensive treatment unit, and I went to a better unit. And she said, if you do good, they will let you out early. I didn't know that was a thing. I thought I was going to be in there for 26 and a half years. That's it. I'm getting out, I'm going to be pushing 60, then what, you know? And so they put me in a better unit. I started doing better. I really got into AA for a while because it was, it used to be a God-centered program, and stuff like that. So I was getting into that, and then I realized I'm like, what I'm searching after wasn't AA that was that feeling. It was the God feeling, the God moment I had that it softened my heart, literally, from a person who could do all those bad things and brag about it. All of a sudden, it softened my heart to be this guy who was like, I feel bad for what I did. I feel guilt. And I'm not going to live in shame for the rest of my life, but I will sit in that guilt and I will do something with this. And they started pushing me through different units. And they're like, wow, you're doing really good. I'm reading a book a day sometimes. I started my own Bible studies. I didn't know anything about the Bible. I had a King James Bible that I got for Christmas back in 1995, and that's what I used. And I had guys that were Jehovah's Witnesses, and I had guys that were Catholic and all sorts of backgrounds. We're all getting together, and they're fighting over everything. And I wasn't learning because they were so busy fighting over doctrine. It was just wild. But I ended up reading so much about mental health that I went into a meeting one day with the director of the unit, and I said, I don't agree with my diagnosis. You guys think I'm schizophrenic? I said, I think that I had a drug problem. I'm not schizophrenic. And they said, we actually agree with you. I said, well, I think I'm bipolar, and I think I have issues because of drugs and alcohol. And they said, we actually agree with you. I'm like, oh, okay. A little while later, the guy who was in the meeting was actually running a halfway house in Mendota. There's over 1,000 acres, beautiful area. And he was running a halfway house on there for guys that might someday get out and trying to retransition them into the community. So I went and he put me on this unit. It was 10 guys. I was one of 10 guys. The other 9 were in for murder. And they were very famous murder. cases and things, so that's kind of intense. And I went in there, and guys did studies with me. Guys did Bible studies. They talked to me all the time about their faith, and they knew they were in for long periods of time, and they made whatever peace they could with that. And they were really nice to me. Everybody said, how was it being in a house full of 9 people that were in for convicted of murder? And they all did their best to share what they knew about God with me, because I was on this journey where I wanted to know more about God. I wanted to know God, and I didn't know Christ at all. I knew, hey, I pray to God all the time, but I didn't know. We talked about being Catholic. Like, I was raised Catholic, and I know I got confirmed, and I'm good to go. So one guy started talking to me about Christ, and it was really interesting that in this moment, one of the staff asked me, she goes, there's a Brewers game we're going to go to out in the community. We'd like you to be involved. We know you like watching the Brewers. I'm like, okay. So I paid money for a ticket. We drove all the way from Madison to Milwaukee to go to this Brewers game. The 3 guys that were with me were all convicted murderers. And I went to the game, and I sat down, and my mind is focused so much on my faith at the time, or what I was trying to find, like this God moment. How can I get more of that? How can I feel that? And I'm not even paying attention to anything else. The whole ride there, I was reading a faith-based book and trying to figure things out. And then all of a sudden, when we got to the Brewers game and I sat down, and I'm like, okay, there's packed, 90-some degrees out, packed full of people. It's early afternoon. Brewers are playing the Rockies, 2 teams that are known for their beer. And all of a sudden, I look over and everybody's drinking. And I'm like, that's all I can focus on, is what people were drinking all around me, what kind of beer they had. How could I get up and go get a beer myself? And I know that if I did go up and get a drink, that I would be throwing away the rest of my life, because they would put me back in the prison part and never let me out again, because they can't trust me. If you can't even handle this, So in this moment where I'm like going to throw away all the rest of my life, this opportunity I had to be in this halfway house, I would have thrown it all away for a drink. And I am extremely angry. I'm emotional. I'm wanting to drink, and and all of a sudden I start doing all the AA prayers, the Serenity Prayer. I did the Our Father, and I'm talking to God, and I said, God, I don't know what to do. And the first thing that popped in my head was Jesus heals. That's not a thought of my own. I didn't realize. I knew, growing up Catholic, I knew Jesus performed miracles, but that was back then, and that's not now. So in that moment, I said, Jesus, I can't do this. Please take this from me. I can't do this. There's no way I can do it. If they let me out, there's no way I can do it. And I'm not going to lie, I was in tears. I was very emotional. And all of a sudden, I felt this thing like it was pulled out of me, where I all of a sudden, in one instant, went from focused on nothing but the drinks around me to all of a sudden, I felt free. I felt calm. I felt good. And I was so happy. I've never felt like that in my life. And I, sitting there in that moment from the 5th inning on, remember all of it. And when I go to leave the Brewers game, there was a girl being picked up by her friends because she's on the floor drunk, puking and passed out and all these things. And I was like, that used to be me. That was me. And I went back to the vehicle, we drove back, and I was like, I was just in shock. These moments I had where God softened my heart, this moment where Christ took away this addiction from me, and all these things. And making a decision for Christ, I went back to the unit, and a couple days later, I actually had a therapist at the time. She said, my one goal is to make you cry. And I said, good luck with that. She's like, oh, I'm going to make you cry someday. And I said, ain't going to happen. And she was a very good therapist. Her and I worked a lot together. And so I was watching the new remake of Ben-Hur in the day room after this, giving my life to Christ. I share this one. I never share this with people when I speak. But I'm watching Ben-Hur, and they're dragging Jesus to the streets, and I'm in a room full of convicted murderers, and I start sobbing. So I saw Jesus getting dragged to the streets. That was right after my salvation moment. That was right after Christ took away all my addictions. And I'm sitting there, one of the staff was over, she goes, are you going to be okay? And I'm like, yep, I got something in my eye. And I held my head back, and I went right to my room, and I just couldn't, I lost it. In that moment, I fully realized completely what's been done for me. The horrible death that Christ, everything he went through for my sins. I can't describe it. I can't describe the feeling of, I did wrong and you went through all that for me. So that's where, the book leads up to all that, where you get, the salvation and all these things. But when I got out of Mendota, they worked at getting me out early. 26 and a half years, I got out in 3 years. In 3 years, I don't know what it was they saw in me, to be quite honest. I like to think it was the Christ in me. They saw that I was not who I used to be. A doctor came from Wausau to say that he thought I was on the wrong medication years ago, and that that he thinks I should have been free and all this stuff. And he said, I don't think he meant to do all this. And I was at a loss. I was like, I just went with it, and they let me out. It used to be a bragging thing to me that in total, it would have, if I would have gotten all my sentences together, it would have been 36 and a half years of incarceration I would have had to face. And somehow I got out early. And when I got out, they moved me up to Oconto, in Oconto County, Wisconsin, in Oconto, right over by the high school. And I didn't know what to do. I was trying to read my Bible. I didn't have any studies. I didn't know where to go. I'd never been to the town, really. I've been through it. And then all of a sudden, there was a guy my brother worked with who is now a reverend for the AG Church it's up over in Michigan, Jesse Yoder. He was going to do a class at my church in Oconto, and Pastor John's brother, Pastor Nick, it's his church. And it was a Foundations of Christianity class. So my brother said, hey, you should meet me there, which is weird. My brother rarely talks to me. We barely do anything together, and I said, fine. So I go all the way across town at night, sitting outside this little house church, and I'm like, waiting for my brother. No one shows up. And I kept on thinking, just walk in. Just walk in. I walk in, and the only people there were Pastor Nick and Pastor Jesse. And I walked in, I sat through every week through this Foundations of Christianity class. No one else showed up. My brother never made it, ever. And so I started going down by Pastor Nick's shop and got to meet his dad, and I got to meet Pastor John. And Pastor John, that was before he was Pastor John, long ago. And we sat back and we started talking at the shop a little bit. We had a lot of similarities from when we were younger and stuff. And it was just, but we had great conversations. He was going through DSOM, District School of Ministry at the time, and he took the time to invest in me and disciple me. He got me into the School of Biblical Evangelism. I was doing the online courses and stuff, and he got me into jail ministry. I started learning as much as I could. That I wanted people to feel like I felt. And I couldn't describe how I felt, but I wanted people to feel that. And I saw guys in jails and prisons, and I was like, you know what? I'm going to preach to these guys. I'm going to share my story. That's all I can do is share my story. And we ended up meeting with some of the guys from jail ministry. I was doing 4 Bible studies a week with different groups, trying to get as much as I can learn in so I can go into jail. It can be intimidating for guys that do jail ministry because a lot of those guys know the Bible better than I do, and they don't even consider themselves Christians. And so you got to know your stuff. COVID started to come along, and I ended up decided to do prison ministry through the mail. So I was doing a prison ministry. I was writing a dozen letters a day sometimes to guys in jail and prison, ministering to their needs and stuff like that. And that ended up all that started to fade out with COVID. They were letting people out early. They were keeping some longer. There was this whole mix-up and things like that, and things just got difficult. Pastor John, he was already up here, and we were talking about me coming up here one day, and that was the goal. Someday I'm going to get off papers early, and I'm going to come up here and be able to meet you guys and speak to you guys, and share my story. And it ended up, I tried petitioning the court one time, and no one would show up for me. I didn't have anybody but Pastor John. Actually, you were with for the first time, weren't you? For the first time, yeah. So we tried to go petition the court to get me released from papers so I could leave the state. And that failed the first time. First time up, he said, no way, ain't gonna happen. So time goes on. I started doing, I was working for different ministries. I've been ministering on my own to people. I over time now, I went to school to be a recovery coach to work with guys with addictions. There's tons of stuff. There's a lot of stuff that's happened. I started working right now. I work for the National Alliance on Mental Illness. I run faith-based groups, 12-step programs that we studied and trained to run stuff. So I run groups for that. And I run groups for mental health with guys down in Green Bay and stuff. But it was a long process. We didn't think we were going to get off papers, and finally, a second time petition that didn't work out. This last time, got a lawyer, and I'll wrap it up short with this one, but it's all right. So I got a lawyer. My wife's family helped us out financially, lent us the money to get me get the lawyer. The lawyer says she deals a lot with this long-term supervision stuff, so we took her word for it. And she was a young woman, and she's walking into a courthouse full of old dudes that have been doing law for a lot of years. But Pastor John and Shelley came up, and I had 20-some people behind me in court, and they put me on the stand. And the district attorney starts asking me questions, and he was trying to get me jumbled up on the dates, and he couldn't, and it didn't work. But then the lawyer said, "You can invoke your right of silence," and I said, "I don't invoke that right." And when I sat down, she said that the burden falls on the state. They have to make a proof that I can't be released, not that I should be released. Back to the courthouse with my lawyer and told her that she knows the law better than he does. And he walked over and said, he is willing to let me be free if he can preach to my family and friends. And in the courthouse, the judge says, I can't be around for this. So he walked out, and the district attorney gave a little sermon to my family and friends. And he pretty much said, I can't prove whether or not Travis is good or not. He goes, I don't know him personally. But he says, I am a believer, and this is what I believe.